And how do we know endotoxic? What is it with a gram-negative bacteria that would cause an endotoxin? So if I said endotoxin, you'd be able to tell me that it's a gram-negative bacteria, right? Why?
The cell wall.
It's part of the cell wall. So lysis of the cell causes the release of those endotoxins, and that causes a drop in blood pressure. So endotoxins are associated with gram-negative bacteria, like Monique said, because it's part of the cell wall. Gram-positive sepsis has a gram-positive bacteria, and that is actually the most common cause of sepsis. Staphylococcus and Streptococcus, those are both gram-positive bacteria, and they produce exotoxin. That means that an exotoxin is part of the normal metabolism that goes on in the bacteria's body, and then it sends that exotoxin outside of its body, and that also can cause toxic shock syndrome. Enterococci are also a gram-positive cocci that lives in the colon and contaminate the skin, and it's one of the leading causes of nosocomial infection of wounds and urinary tract. And enterococci have a natural resistance to the antibody penicillin, and it is acquiring resistance to other antibiotics such as vancomycin. Group B streptococci are a common cause of neonatal sepsis, and for the neonate that can be life-threatening. Puerperal sepsis, that's also known as puerperal fever or childbirth fever. It's a nosocomial infection of the uterus. You can acquire it through childbirth. Remember in the day when those doctors used to come from the autopsy room into the labor room and deliver babies, and there was a lot of puerperal sepsis or childbirth fever going on there. It can lead to peritonitis, which is infection of the abdominal cavity, and septicemia. Puerperal sepsis is caused by a group A beta hemolytic streptococci, and the most common one is Streptococcus pyogenes. Streptococcus pyogenes is a bacteria that is responsible for a lot of different diseases, and one of them is this puerperal sepsis. Just a little recap here. Presence of microbes in the blood. If it's a virus, I call it viremia. The bacteria, bacteremia, and those are just transient. They're just going through. Fungus is fungemia. Septicemia, though, is where you actually have the bacteria growing and multiplying in the blood. And then the septic shock is an excessive immune response, and you get that cytokine storm and hemodynamic collapse. You're going to get low blood pressure that can't be elevated. Bacterial infections of the heart. Just a little anatomy here. The endocardium is the innermost layer that surrounds the heart. And if you have inflammation of that endocardium, it's called endocarditis. So when you have an itis on the end of a word, that means inflammation of. Subacute, meaning that it's developing slowly. Bacterial endocarditis usually is caused by alpha hemolytic streptococci. Also, though, staphylococci and enterococci can cause subacute endocarditis. Symptoms are fever, weakness, heart murmur, can affect the heart valves. Acute bacterial endocarditis is usually caused by Staphylococcus aureus. You know that bacteria. And it develops more rapidly and progresses further than the subacute. It can affect the heart valves and it's often fatal. Vegetations are when bacteria lodge in pre-existing lesions from a congenital heart defect or a disease such as rheumatoid fever or syphilis, those affect the heart, or rheumatic fever. Bacteria multiplying form a biofilm on the leaflets of the infected valves. And the vegetations then, I have a picture of it that you can see. Vegetations then consist of strands of fibrin, platelets, blood cells, and the actual bacterial cell as well. So, just to recap here, endocarditis is inflammation of the inner lining of the heart. And you can see on that infected heart over there, it has vegetations on it. Right here on the heart valve, all the yellow stuff. And acute endocarditis is associated with Staphylococcus aureus, and subacute associated with alpha hemolytic streptococci, mostly alpha hemolytic streptococci. Oh. Here's an actual picture with those vegetations on it. It has the fibrin platelet vegetations and caused by the bacterial damage. Okay. Yeah, postmortem. Pericarditis, that's inflammation of the sac around the heart, the pericardium, and that one is usually caused by streptococci. Rheumatic fever is an autoimmune reaction, and it's in response to repeated infections by Streptococcus pyogenes. And these inflammations cause arthritis and damage to the heart valve. And you can see actual nodules that form at the joints underneath the skin. About 10% of the people that have developed this rheumatic fever also develop Sydenham's chorea. That's also called St. Vitus dance. You ever heard of it? Back when it must have been around in my parents' childhood, because they used to, when we would be, you know, hyperactive or whatever, they would say that we had St. Vitus dance. Well, it's involuntary movements of the legs and the arms of these people that have the Sydenham's chorea. And it lasts for a couple months and then it goes away. And they don't have any control over it. They're just kind of flailing around with their arms and legs. There's a picture of that nodule that appears at a joint subcutaneously there with rheumatic fever. Tularemia. Tularemia is also called rabbit fever. It's a zoonotic disease. of the lymph nodes, and it's caused by a gram-negative bacteria, a rod. You don't have to remember gram-negative rod and all that. I'm just putting it in there so that you know we're dealing with bacteria called Francisella tularensis. Transmission occurs through the bite of an infected tick in deer flies or contact with these small animals that are infected, like rabbits and ground squirrels. So the most common is rabbits, and that's why it's also known as rabbit fever. Bacteria can penetrate skin through just minor cuts or abrasions that you have, and then that results in a small ulcer at the infection site, and later then you're going to get lymph node involvement. And if the eyes get infected, then there's a pussy type conjunctivitis. Signs and symptoms of tularemia is at the site of entry where the bacteria goes in, there's going to be an ulceration there, followed by septicemia and pneumonia. If it is a respiratory route, meaning dust is contaminated with urine or feces of infected animals, then it can cause pneumonia. And the pneumonia type has a mortality rate greater than 30%. Just a little recap here. Rabbit fever or tularemia caused by the bacteria Francisella tularensis. Highly infectious, transmitted through skin breaks or tick bites or through the respiratory tract, and spread systemically. The potential bioterrorism agent, and symptoms include headache, backache, fever, chills, weakness. You don't feel good. It can be fatal, but it responds to tetracycline. There's a picture of an ulcer from an entry where the bacteria went in. Brucellosis, that's also known as undulant fever. And undulant means wave-like or periodic spiking of the fever. Pathogen is a gram-negative rod. Brucella is the genus. And then depending on what it affects, it has different species. So Brucella abortus affects cattle, and Brucella suis pigs, and Brucella melitensis sheep, goats, and camels. And just know that brucellosis is caused by Brucella. It's an occupational hazard of animal handlers, such as veterinarians, ranchers, or people that work in slaughterhouses, because they are in direct contact with these animals. And it gets, also can be, besides direct contact, it can be transmitted through infected products such as raw cheeses and milk.
I had that. I had brucellosis.
You did?
And my family too, just for eating goat cheese.
Oh, goat cheese?
Yeah.
Oh, I like goat cheese.
I love it, but it was, I guess, not very well prepared, or the animal was sick.
Did you get sick as well?
The what?
Did you get sick as well?
I had it was very painful treatment.
What did they do for you?
Streptomycin,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe
Mm-hmm.
my family was worsened.